So I'd like to thank everybody for joining. I want to welcome you all to this South Loop community listening session. This event is being hosted by Grace Episcopal Church and Holy Trinity Lutheran Church in the Loop, which we refer to as HTLoop. My name is Tim Peters, and I serve as the Congregational Council President at Holy Trinity, and I've got the privilege of being your moderator tonight. So I did just write some things down so I don't talk too long and get in the way of our guests that we've asked to join us. And I guess just to introduce myself a little bit, my wife and I have lived in the South Loop since 2021. We are officially empty nesters now, and we, for almost 20 years, were active parents at South Loop Elementary, Old St. Mary's School, as well as then Jones College Prep. I would like to introduce to you, many of you probably know her, but the rector of Grace Episcopal is Pastor Amity Carrubba. There's Amity.
Hello, good evening.
And I also want to introduce a new addition to the Holy Trinity Lutheran Church staff, Pastor Sharai Jacob.
Hello.
Pastor Sharai began with us really the first business day of this year. So we are excited to have Pastor Sharai in the South Loop teaming up with Amity. HTLoop is blessed to be able to use Grace Place on Saturday evenings for worship. Grace Place is where Grace Episcopal is housed and has their services on Sundays. HTLoop celebrated 10 years of our existence in December, and we're excited that Pastor Sharai is our second pastor that we've called to that location. In September of this past year, our church began the process of strategic planning for the future. And naturally, we reached out to Pastor Amity to join us in our journey. One of the most important takeaways in the early stages of this process that we've learned is for us all to listen. I think we hear that more and more in this day and age. Myself being in sales, that's the number one thing that the stereotypical salesperson does not do, but we're told to. But we've been told to listen, and not just to people inside of our congregations and inside of our walls, but more importantly, to the community outside of our walls. Both Grace and HTLoop understand that church has changed over the years. It's no longer about filling the sanctuary on Saturday night or Sunday morning. It's about bringing our message of welcome and grace to the community around us. So I'm not sure if it was coincidence or the Holy Spirit at work this morning, but a study popped up in a news feed that I get every day. And I'm just going to read it to you because it just really fits what we're going after today. Yesterday, there was a Pew Research Center report that the number of Americans with no religious affiliation reached nearly 30%, up 12% from 2007. The nuns, as called by researchers, that's N-O-N-E-S, not nuns in the Catholic Church, but the nuns are people who are diverse, young, and left-leaning individuals. Most believe in God or another higher power, but few go to religious services. Many of the nuns say they were raised in religious households, but developed mixed feelings about religion's impact on society. About 43% said religion does more bad than good, while 41% said it does equal amounts of good and bad. Other nuns say they dislike religious organizations and had bad experiences with them. Wow. And here we are. After reading that, I sure thanked God that we have Pastor Amity and Pastor Sharai to help us reach the nuns in our community. And with that, I just wanted to set context for everybody here, because there are some guests that are not familiar with Grace Episcopal or with Holy Trinity. And I wanted to read you mission statements from each congregation, because I think there's room for nuns in both of these mission statements. And Grace Episcopal is a church, Grace Episcopal Church is a place for all. The curious, the hurting, the imperfect, the joyful. We gather as a lively and visible group of Christians dedicated to social justice and positive change in Chicago's South Loop neighborhood and beyond. That's Grace's statement. Holy Trinity's statement reads, whoever we are, whatever our religious or spiritual background, or how we feel about church, whatever the color of our skin, our sexual or gender identities, God welcomes us here. God's acceptance of all compels us to stand against racism, sexism, heterosexism, xenophobia, classism, ageism, ableism, and all forms of hate and prejudice. So I think it was important just for you to hear those words. And even for us members of Holy Trinity or of Grace Episcopal, it's good for us to hear that once in a while. Because I think we do go after the nuns. And the whole point of us being here today is welcoming our panelists. And I'm going to give a little bit of time for them to introduce themselves now, because they're people that are very present in our community. And with that said, I am going to ask that our panelists introduce themselves and describe your current role and your experience in the South Loop. And I will start with Alderman Robinson.
Well, good evening, everyone. Tim, thank you for allowing us this opportunity. I would also like to thank Holy Trinity as well as Grace Church. I am the Alderman of the 4th Ward. I am a former South Looper. I left college, believe it or not, in 2005 and moved directly to the South Loop. I left the South Loop in 2011. Many of you know that for 15 years, when I had hair, I have an insurance practice that I still run to this day. And in 2017, I ran for state representative. That district goes far south as the South Shore community, along the lakefront to the Gold Coast community, so encompassing the South Loop. Currently, as the Alderman of the 4th Ward, that boundary is 53rd Street, so Kenwood High School along the lakefront to Jackson, or Jones College Prep is the boundaries of the ward that I now represent. It has been a rewarding opportunity to represent the 4th Ward, but particularly the South Loop, as well as Printers Row. It's a great melting pot of folks. And what I always appreciate is when I do have community meetings or I do have events, how many people show up because they do care about their community. And as the Alderman, I can't do this work alone. So it's always good to have the community support. So I'm looking forward to being on this esteemed panel this evening, answering questions that come my way, and certainly look forward to seeing you all in Printers Row or in the South Loop soon.
Thank you, Alderman. I will put the spotlight on Jamie Brown now.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Jamie Brown, and I am a police district counselor for District 1, which encompasses all the South Loop. So we go from the Chicago River to 31st Street to the lake, and then west to Des Plaines. So it really is the Loop, South Loop, Printers Row, Prairie District, Dearborn Park, Dearborn Homes, parts of the West Loop, downtown, and the Loop. So it's a very active district, central business district of Chicago. In this role, it's a 3-person role, although the 1st district only has 2 members at this time. We act as conduits between the Chicago Police Department and the community. So in this first 7 months, my co-counselor and I have been just trying to get to know people, know neighborhood groups, know the issues, talk to business owners, and just figuring out what the core issues that we see in the community around public safety, community services, and otherwise. I'm an attorney by education, and I have only lived in the South Loop or very close since I've been in Chicago, which has been since 2017. I lived at 1345 South Wabash with my cousin when I first moved here. And then I lived at Paper Place Lofts, which is at 801 South Wells. And then I moved across Canal, across Harrison, over to South Clinton, which some people argue is West Loop. I still think it's close enough to be considered South Loop. So I'm very well versed with this area. I love Printers Row. To echo Alderman Robinson's it's such a melting pot. There's so many great things and dedicated people and residents. And I'm just grateful for the opportunity to be here and speak with you all.
Thank you, Jamie. And I guess, Dennis, you figure that last person is you here to introduce yourself. Go ahead, Dennis.
I'm Dennis McLendon. I've lived in the South Loop since 1983, and most of that time I have followed planning, land use, infrastructure issues for originally the South Loop Neighbors Association until that kind of disappeared in the 90s, and then the new Historic Printers Row Neighbors, which became the current South Loop Neighbors about 20 years ago. I'm also very interested in urban history, background in city planning, and so I'm self-appointed neighborhood historian, aware that I was present at the birth of a new neighborhood when I settled here in '83, and so I've been collecting the ephemera and all of the files that I could since that time, and you know, the result is that now I have 2 different file folders marked White Sox Stadium proposal because we had one in 1985-86 that we had a bit of a neighborhood struggle with at the very beginning on the very same site where it's now being discussed.
Fantastic. You got me excited just talking about White Sox. Now, since this is the HTLoop and Grace Episcopal being Southside, I'm not even going to ask the question about whose allegiance is where with baseball. I will say, though, that I grew up down in Beverly, and so I love Alderman Robinson's hat. But, you know, going further into the welcoming statement with Holy Trinity, you know, they welcomed me, even though our main location is 2 blocks away from Wrigley Field. So anyway, so we're going to jump into a few questions. We've got some serious questions where we want to get down to business, but then we've got some lighthearted questions too to keep everybody maybe smiling and taking some extra notes. But let's just start out. The first question that I had for all of our panelists, and I think we'll go in reverse order, maybe starting with Dennis. But the question is for everybody, from your vantage point, what are the major changes you've seen in the South Loop and surrounding neighborhoods in the last 5 years? And what do you think things are going to look like in another 5 years? And this could be related to anything: police, safety, schools, neighborhood issues. And Dennis, we're just asking for 5 years. I know you've got 40.
Well, I didn't realize the focus was going to be so recent. And so, you know, my generalized answer is that, you know, in my 40 years, I've seen the South Loop just become another neighborhood that young people moving to Chicago consider settling in the same way that they do Wrigleyville or Lakeview or Lincoln Park and so on. And so that's the biggest change. But in the last 5 years, I would say that even though I think we need to keep our eyes on the fact that statistically our numbers are still extremely low, the anecdotal evidence that swirls around us now about both crime and disorder has come to dominate the discussions of a lot of my neighbors, I fear. It really is not a factor for me, but it is kind of sobering to almost every month read about a pretty serious incident at or below the Roosevelt Green and Orange Line station. And so there's, so I would say that growth of, I'm hesitant to even call it lawlessness, but disorder as well as actual crime might be the biggest factor of the last 5 years.
Yeah. I think we'll go in reverse order. Jamie, can we go to you now?
Sure. So since I only have about 5 years, it's technically 7, I guess, here, I can tell you when I first moved in, it was great, but I've seen more and more developments that have been put up in the South Loop, and I'm a big fan of density. because I do believe in law of supply and demand. The more we build, the more likely rents and things will go down. So I think that's critical. As a Chicago transplant, I do see and meet and talk to a ton of people that choose to move into South Loop over other neighborhoods, because South Loop and West Loop don't necessarily have the same reputations and, let's just say, baggage and bad reputation or reputation in general that other places do. So that's saying that in a completely positive way. You have the opportunity to come to a neighborhood that is, for all intents and purposes, new, and it's a neighborhood. South meets North, essentially. In 5 years, I anticipate there will be a lot of people who want to stay in South Loop in the downtown area, even as they begin starting families. Traditionally, when people begin to have families, they move to the suburbs. That is not necessarily the case with this millennial generation. They want to stay in the city. So I'm hoping, and maybe just projecting this, that there's going to be a new high school built, because there's a need. If you just walk around, there's a ton of people with children, elementary school age, that go to South Loop Elementary. There's one elementary school in West Loop, Skinner. There's no, Jones Magnet is a magnet school, and we need another CPS high school to accommodate the families that want to continue to live in the area, so that it becomes a family-friendly area and people aren't forced to leave the neighborhood.
All right, Alderman Robinson, you're following that.
Jamie, thank you. Thanks a lot for stealing my thunder. I agree with Jamie. When we look 5 years out, the South Loop, my hope is that we will be able to have a high school in our area that's much needed, that all of our kids will be able to go to. I have been supporting this in my former role as a state rep, certainly alongside of my colleague, chairwoman now, Pat Dow in the 3rd Ward. And so I believe that we'll get this done. I also hope that we will see more businesses, more small businesses come into our area. I've been sad to see, because remember, I go back 20 years of living in the South Loop. I know what it looks like to have robust businesses in our corridors. And my hope is that we get back to filling in a lot of our retail spaces that are vacant. It's something that is top priority for me as your alderman. And then also to make sure that we feel safe again. The South Loop used to be a community that folks moved to because they wanted to have a safe community. Many of you know, I mentioned this before, my mother's a South Loop resident. After living, 40 years in Chatham, if not probably longer than that, in Chatham, she's a retired school teacher. And she saved her money and was able to buy a condo in the South Loop. And she moved to the South Loop because she wanted to be able to walk her dog and to go grab a cup of coffee, to be able to grab a bite to eat, because she felt that the community is safe. And so, ladies and gentlemen, my hope is that we get back there. And that's why I think it's important to work alongside of folks like Jamie and others, and even Dennis, that are able to give us some of that history. And certainly, our faith-based organizations, to get back to where we are in an environment that we all feel that we can go out and walk our community and feel safe.
Thank you very much. All very valid concerns and items. So I need to throw this out there. I know everybody's wanting to get input, especially somebody like Pastor Sharai, who's new to the neighborhood. Very important question for the panelists. What is your favorite South Loop restaurant? So we'll start with Dennis.
Dennis is not really a restaurant guy, but when the weather's warm enough, I bicycle over to Garib Nawaz at Halsted and Roosevelt for delicious Pakistani food that I can get 2 meals out of a $5 wrap.
There we go. All right. Alderman Robinson. And Alderman Robinson, you could go outside the South Loop. You've got a big ward.
Well, I'm going to stay right in the South Loop. I'm going to go to Williams Inn, which is a great sports bar and pizzeria. I am a huge deep dish fan.
Williams
And
Inn?
so
I can
those
look it
of
up.
you that don't know Williams Inn, please go by and see Jamal Jr. He is the proprietor of that great place. And I'm trying to get him in the Hyde Park and in the Bronzeville as well. But that is my favorite South Loop restaurant.
I think you stumped some of us. That's fantastic. All right, Jamie.
So I love half sour. So I've known Jesse and gone in there since they opened. It was previously a burger joint. It's been around as long as I've lived in the neighborhood. So I kind of got attached and started going, became friendly with the owners. They have a cool like trivia night. I've hosted parties and functions in the basement, and they're just really accommodating, and it's a great neighborhood spot.
Good spot. And yes, it was Blackie's since like the 1920s up until a handful of years ago. And they still own the building. But no, it's a great addition to the neighborhood. And it makes me feel old knowing that it's been there that long now. All right. Well, back to a little bit of business here. So next question, and I'll start with the Alderman because it seems like this could be a tough one. What are the most difficult issues you currently address?
Tim, the major issue that I am trying to address is our migrant crisis. Many of you know that the mayor asked me to go to the border to assess the challenges that we face in El Paso and San Antonio. And no matter if you're a Democrat or Republican, the folks that are at the border for years have been calling for immigration reform. And because of the inactions of federal government, that's why we have a crisis in the city of Chicago. And for me, it is something that I have been struggling with since I've taken office. We have done some great things as it relates to the Standard Club, which is in our area. We have put up lighting. We have closed Pritzker Park at 9 p.m. We have officers that are there 24/7 and pushing the city to do more, making sure that that corridor is also clean. But there's certainly more that we can do. I was talking a little earlier about what Grace Church can do and asking our other faith-based organizations to assist us with this crisis that is going to continue. And at the end of the day, we all want to make sure that folks, again, have a great quality of life, that people have shelter. And I think it's our responsibility. But we cannot bear this burden alone, which is why I have been in constant communication with both of our senators, Senator Duckworth, Senator Dick Durbin, as well as our congressional congregation, to make sure that they do more as it relates to resources and also lastly putting people to work. But ladies and gentlemen, there are a lot of issues that we have in the ward. Unfortunately, this is the number one issue that I'm dealing with, particularly on the north end of the ward. But every day is a new day, and we are trying our best to make sure that we stay on top of the issues and concerns that we're having with this crisis in the north end of the ward.
Thank you, Alderman. Jamie, I'm going to jump to you. Obviously, anybody driving down State Street has seen, the masses of immigrants that have been there, and it's got to be a struggle for the police to work through this as well. So I'm interested in your opinion and other issues too. This is not just the immigration issues.
Absolutely. And yes, I want to commend Alderman Robinson for becoming a leader on this issue at a time when many other aldermen have stepped back. He has stepped up and spoken up for the community. So Alderman Robinson, thank you for that, especially at the Standard Club. What I can tell you is in working with District 1, unfortunately, a lot of cars do get dispatched to maintain a presence at the migrant shelters as well as the landing station. So we're dealing with an already understaffed police district. There's, I think, around 200 officers, and we're taking 4 or 5 cars 24 hours a day and putting them at migrant shelters. This obviously creates a backlog of ability for police to rapidly respond to crime as it's happening. So that's one of the unfortunate things that I think should be addressed, because it's a shared responsibility for both the city and the state. And I hate to see, you know, patrolmen being taken to go sit in their cars by the Standard Club, because that's, you know, 2, 4, 6, 10 police officers on any given shift that are being, you know, on this sort of patrol. And specifically from a public safety lens, because that's what my position deals with, crime is one of the biggest things. And I try to take, I do my diligence in taking crime concerns very seriously. Even if numbers are comparatively low, I do believe perception is reality. And everyone that I meet who has to tell me something, whether it's a package was stolen, packages are being constantly stolen over in Dearborn homes, or that their kids can't walk home from school alone, I take that very seriously. So those are 2 things. And I often hear about, of course, carjackings. Those are just up around the city, but very specifically downtown, and businesses. The small business corridor and the large business corridor, quite frankly, are being hit with a lot of robberies, thefts, smash and grabs, things of that nature. It's not just off Michigan Avenue. It's on Dearborn, it's on Clark, it's in the West Loop. So that's something that I think that we do need to address more proactively to encourage businesses to maintain presence in our neighborhood.
Thank you. Dennis, you're in the spotlight now. What are the difficult issues you see and you're addressing?
Well, I mean, there's short term, there's the asylum seekers crisis, and largely my neighbors want to figure out a way to help. And I keep thinking about what Germany did to take in all the Syrian refugees by essentially paying people to rent their spare rooms to them. And it strikes me that there's an awful lot of unused bedrooms in Chicago that could help us to solve this problem if we could get past the paperwork issue of keeping track of them as they make their way up on the list for permanent homes and resettlement, which I understand is currently a problem if you just go and offer shelter to a refugee family. So, you know, that crisis, we have our fingers crossed, will get solved in sometime in the next 2 or 3 years, or at least become less acute. But under the surface is still the large number of homeless. And so this again is a place that you know, my neighbors want to help, but at some arm's length distance. And so we need intermediaries in the faith-based community or in social service agencies that know what actually needs to be done. And this, of course, goes back 100 years in the South Loop to our rescue missions that have been here trying to save men from the evils of drink and the things that go along with that here in the South Loop. But so we need some new approaches, some more effective approaches to the homelessness issue.
Thank you, Dennis. The next question I want to go into is a little bit on the opposite side. We talk about difficult issues, but I'm going to start with you again, Alderman Robinson. What are the primary signs of hope for the future that you see, and what groups are doing the most to address community needs?
Well, look, I have to commend the South Loop Neighbors Association. I have to commend Grace Church. We were talking a little earlier about the YMCA wanting to come into our community to take over Pritzker Park and bringing affordable housing to our community. We know how expensive it is to live in our community. But what does that mean about the Y? The Y is an institution that certainly of all walks of life and financial resources, anyone can go to the Y. The YMCA is where I learned to swim. And I was so appreciative of how many people in the South Loop came out to hear about this great asset that we can have in our community. And so for me, as I mentioned a little earlier, when I have a town hall meeting or when I'm bringing an issue to the neighbors, or a developer is wanting to build in the South Loop and I have a community meeting, I'm always impressed how many people come out to learn about or hear about what's going on in their community. And so what that does for me is it gives me hope that we're going to be able to have a robust community with all walks of life, with all races and backgrounds. And so I'm very happy about that, particularly as the alderman, because one of the tools in my toolkit is development. And so for me, having a community that's engaged is extremely important. I always say this, that when issues arise, I know that the neighbors in the South Loop will be behind me and support me if, in fact, I need them to come down to City Hall. And so for me, it allows me the opportunity to really continue to do the work that I'm doing in the 4th Ward, particularly in the South Loop. And so, again, I'm extremely appreciative. Lastly, the developers that come see me, the businesses that also want to come into the South Loop, for me, that means that although we're in a very tough financial climate, people are still very interested in our community. And it gives me hope to be able to, again, do my job, because I can say that folks are interested in investing in our neighborhood. And so I hope that those of you that are, again, South Loop residents also feel that energy from me, because I believe that we will turn the corner. It might not be next year, all the challenges that we're facing, but I do have hope that we will be able to, again, adjust the tide, bring retailers in, have certainly more affordable housing. And when I say affordable housing for young working folk or retirees that want to come back into the area. That is what's important to me, to, again, keep up the makeup that we have in our community. And so, again, this is why one of the main reasons that I decided to leave the state and run for alderman of the 4th.
Great, thank you. Dennis, how about your thoughts on signs of hope for the future and what groups are doing the most to address community needs?
Well, I guess one rather intriguing sign of hope is what we saw at the meeting last week about a symbol proposal, where everyone who was there spoke in favor of it. And so that gives me some hope that we have a new contingent of YIMBYs that are very interested in development and affordable housing, helping to solve the problems of the city, that are slowly supplanting the stereotypical boomers, the gray-haired folks that would come out to say, no, you can't build anything across the street from my apartment because that's going to reduce my property values or whatever. And it's especially can't be something that has affordable units in it. Now, I think there are serious questions to be raised about Assemble Chicago at the moment about the per unit cost, that maybe it's time to start that process over again. But that's a whole nother Zoom meeting about that.
Thank you. Jamie?
So Alderman Robinson, I also learned how to swim at the YMCA. So that's funny. I'm originally from Washington, D.C., and the YMCA is just a community place where everyone goes. So I was very excited to hear that a comprehensive YMCA facility was headed towards the South Loop. For those of you that maybe aren't super familiar with the model, it's a sliding scale of membership. So if you are low income, you pay less, but everyone's afforded the same services. And I just think they're wonderful, having grown up in one. So I digress. I think what gives me hope for the future is the continued interest and development within the neighborhood. So like the YMCA in Assemble Chicago, interest in the 78, which has been vacant for so long. A new entertainment district would be beautiful in that area, whether or not you're a White Sox fan or not. It would be just great for the community. So that gives me renewed hope. Seeing new venues like Signature at 312 South Wabash. It's a new Southern hospitality restaurant. It tells me that people are still interested. It's just seeing the numbers. From the 2010 to the 2020 census, the population in this community area has boomed. So it's just a matter of keeping up with the concerns of residents, in my opinion. I think groups like this one, Grace Place, Neighbors of South Loop, all the community organizations are doing a great job convening residents and giving them a chance to offer their opinions, as well as all the elected officials who hold ward nights, who come to the community, who come to HOA meetings, who go to the farmers market. Alderman Robinson, I know I've seen you at the Printers Row Farmers Market at least 3 times over the summer. So all of that, I think, gives me hope. And I truly believe that groups are invested in the community here.
Great, thank you. And this brings to mind something else that I should have mentioned before. You talk about groups in the community. In addition to being the pastor of HTLoop, Pastor Sharai will also be the pastor of the South Loop Campus Ministry, which has traditionally served the Roosevelt, DePaul, Columbia communities. And so we're really looking forward to that engagement. I think my next fun question here, you guys have already talked about a little bit, but I'm super excited about all the talk and the drawings I've seen. I wanted you all to share your thoughts on the White Sox possible move to the South Loop. You can already know what my feelings are. So let's start with Dennis.
Well, as I say, it's my second time seeing this movie.
That's awesome.
But a lot of things have changed since 1986. The current facility, guaranteed rate, was the last of the old flying saucer in a parking lot ballparks, and was followed just a couple years later by the new model of Camden Yards, which has now been emulated throughout the league. And so districts like Washington's Navy Yard or Pittsburgh North Side show us, I think, how a ballpark and an entertainment district a newly built entertainment district, not one that relies like Wrigley Field on old buildings with cheap rent, but a newly built entertainment district topped by housing units can be a comfortable, walkable place. It is not necessarily an evil to be avoided at all costs. However, one of the main concepts that has worried me for 40 years about the South Loop is that we don't have enough east-west connections. Because the neighborhood was shaped for a century by the rail lines that kept any streets from going east and west through the area. And then when we redeveloped those rail yards, everybody was too cheap and too scared of streets to put in a complete street grid. So the problem in squeezing a new ballpark into the 78 is going to be how to access it. And we have to assume that 40% of the attendees are going to arrive by private auto. So is that going to solely be off of the new Wells Wentworth, Clark Street, and Roosevelt Road? Can we use the B&O CT Railroad Bridge there at 16th to make a connection over to Canal, at least for bus traffic to get in and out off the Ryan? So there's a lot of details of the urban design and planning to yet be worked out, but it's not something that I'm scared of.
All right. Well, there's a lot of detail. I can tell my wife that the last thing she needs to worry about is guys sleeping over after Sox games. Alderman Robinson, how about you?
You know, I was listening to Dennis, and ladies and gentlemen, that's why it's important to have folks that are still engaged, that have the history. I was not aware, and I'm a Chicagoan. I grew up in Chatham, that this goes back to 1986, and we are circling back to this site. And so I appreciate Dennis's history. I also appreciate Dennis being very clear on the challenges, because I have the same challenges. How are we going to make sure that whether we are going to the ballpark, we can enter and exit, or we live around the ballpark, how we can get to and from our homes is a challenge certainly that I have, and I've expressed that to my colleague because the 78 is in the 3rd Ward, Chairwoman Alderman Dow. And so I certainly, again, expressed my concerns. But I also appreciate what Dennis is saying, that we should not be afraid of it. We should be having conversations around this, and we shouldn't be cheap this time, and we should get it right. I also want to throw something out there for you, ladies and gentlemen, as well, is that we have to be able to think about what we're going to do with our football team that's on the lakefront, that's also in the 4th Ward, the Chicago Bears. And so having those conversations as well. We're a sports city. We are a world-class city. And so I believe that we'll be able to do this and get it done right. And my hope is that we can also do this and not put the earnest on the taxpayers. That is certainly another concern that I have as well. But again, I think that we should be having the conversations. I think that, as Dennis mentioned to you, we have a lot of great examples in other cities that have gotten it done right. And we should be looking to those cities for what they did right and what they did wrong. But I'm super excited, particularly that this project is going to be so close to my ward, and I'm going to be working alongside of my colleague in the 3rd Ward to make sure that we do something that I believe everybody will be proud of for years to come.
Excellent. Jamie, what are your thoughts?
I'll make this brief because Dennis and the Alderman summed it up. I'm very excited. I am actually serve on the 78 Advisory Committee, because before the 78 was in the 3rd Ward, it was in the 25th Ward. And I was appointed to that position by the Alderman of the 25th Ward, where we worked with the Mayor's office in the development of the 78. Unfortunately, when COVID happened, there was a really awesome plan. They were in talks with United to move their headquarters there. COVID happened and things changed. So it's been a struggle to find an anchor tenant in that land. And reviving the 1980s plan might be the best thing for it. I do believe it is. I can give another anecdote. I am from Washington, D.C. originally, as mentioned. So I saw the beginning and to now where Nats Park is, and it has changed a whole neighborhood. The Navy Yard, Nats Park area was not what it is now. It has brought so much needed development along the river, business corridor, tons of housing, as well as restaurants, small businesses, and truly like a walkable area that I do believe all world-class cities such as Chicago should have at their available.
Excellent. Well, I know there's a few details to work out before the White Sox move to the South Loop, but I'll be ready to welcome them. That's for sure. So going back, we talked about some issues with within the community, and so our next question is, do you feel the community is positioned to deal with the issues we've discussed effectively? And if not, or if so, what else is needed to deal with the issues? I'll throw that one back to the alderman.
Well, number one, we need to be very serious about mental health. Many of our unhoused neighbors have mental health or having mental health episodes, and the city of Chicago has to do more. We also need to make sure, and many of you know that we've closed a lot of our mental health clinics across the city of Chicago, but there are a lot of great organizations that are doing great work. I can say that truthfully because many of those great organizations I funded when I was in the General Assembly. And so the city of Chicago has to work alongside these organizations. The city can't do this work alone. And so we have to be able to bring services to where our unhoused neighbors are. And so that is something that I have been working alongside of the city of Chicago and the organizations to be able to, again, help our unhoused folks in the South Loop and certainly the surrounding areas, number one. As it relates to public safety, we have to be able to recruit more police officers. And that is a struggle. Jamie mentioned that a little earlier. We have to create a space where folks want to be police officers. I share in a lot of my meetings, when I see a police officer walking or in the car, I always wave. I always give them a thumbs up. If I see them out in a restaurant, I try to buy them a cup of coffee. I let them know how appreciative I am because we need them. And so I would also ask those of you on this Zoom call that you do the same. We have to make sure that our police officers feel appreciated. And they have a very, very tough job in the climate that we're currently in. And that's a struggle that is not only in Chicago, it's certainly a struggle across the country. I mentioned our migrant crisis. That is an issue that we have to be lock and step with our federal government. They absolutely have to do more. We cannot bear the burden solely. And then I want to even out the conversation around affordability. When we talk about the Sox Stadium coming in, we talk about development. We also have to make sure that we have a balance and that we do not price folks, particularly our young folks, our folks like me that my first stop, my first apartment was in the South Loop. And so we have to make sure that we're creating spaces for folks that are working and particularly our young folks. And so those are the challenges that we're faced with. But I believe that the electeds that we have in place, I talked to Conway and Alderman Riley and Alderman Dow, we all get it. And we're all lock and step of talking to my colleagues at the state level and the federal level. And so with that said, I'm hopeful that although we have challenges, ladies and gentlemen, that we will be able to turn the tide and get to a place that we were 5, 6, 10 years ago, where we felt comfortable in our area, which is one of the reasons that many people flock to the South Loop. I think that we will get there. And certainly as your alderman, that is top priority for me.
Thank you, Alderman. Jamie, I'll throw it over to you now.
Sure. So is this community positioned to deal with issues effectively? I think just echoing a theme, like the first district is not staffed. So when that happens, it's difficult for response. So I think continuously recruiting quality police officers that would like to serve and protect is critical to addressing some of the criminal and public safety issues that have been raised. Now, as far as community, it's very difficult. I'll be very honest here. it's difficult for a unified community message to come across as the South Loop because it's represented by multiple aldermen, multiple state reps, multiple state senators, multiple Cook County commissioners, and it creates confusion for residents. For example, on Clark Street, people don't know often if they're in Alderman Conway's district or Alderman Robinson's district when they're going to file a complaint. But to Alderman Robinson's point, he's been communicating with all the aldermen that represent this area, and we need the same thing to happen with the state reps and the state senators and the Cook County commissioners. So if there was some kind of, I don't know, political body where all the South Loop representatives could meet and, you know, have these sort of discussions, talk about issues, meet with residents, I think that would go a long way.
Great. Dennis, how about you?
Can you remind me of the question, please?
Yeah, so we're just asking if you feel like the community's positioned to deal with the issues that we've discussed effectively and what else might be needed.
Well, we have talked about some of the places where we need pretty significant new resources for dealing with mental health, with the unhoused, with the asylum seekers numbers.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one that that resonates. The screen just went dark here, so all right, we're coming up to 7:26. I did just put a note. If anybody has questions you want to put in the chat, feel free. We'll try to wrap up pretty quickly here so that we will have the opportunity for you to come off of mute and ask questions. But I have one.
Tim, I wanted to just jump in for a minute and really echo what Jamie mentioned about how the South Loop as a neighborhood is split and divided into so many different, you know, wards and you know, at the state level and such. And that was really interesting for me to navigate when I first started as pastor at Grace. That, I mean, even folks on this Zoom this evening who live in the neighborhood that we call the South Loop, but maybe have different aldermen, different state reps. And I know that's a really large issue, but to me, a neighborhood and a community is the place where people, you know, work, shop, eat, worship, you know, play, and that really is the South Loop. That is one neighborhood. I do feel like the neighborhood is unified in the way that people live their lives. But in terms of how we relate to our elected officials and different levels of government, it's pretty layered. So I have no idea what might be the solution to that, but it definitely, you know, it's quite a thing to navigate all of the different components that make up our neighborhood. Yeah.
Thank you, Amity. The last question for everybody, and before one other fun one, but this may be a loaded question coming from this group. But what role do you see for the religious community in addressing any of the issues that we've talked about that are facing the community? And I'll start with Jamie.
So I have a quote from a Bible verse that I want to quote, and it's from Matthew 12:25-26. But Jesus knew their thoughts and said to them, every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and every city or house divided against itself will not stand. If Satan casts out Satan, he is divided against himself. How then will his kingdom stand? So Jesus of Nazareth, son of a Jewish carpenter from Nazareth, said that. And to me, that resonates closely. We are becoming very divided as a city. A lot of blame is being placed. And there's a lot of divisive figures who are not making things better. around the struggles that we all have. So for me, a religious body can help to ease the divisiveness, whether in the community, whether that be, small dinners, meet the neighbors. But truly, I think the divisiveness that I see occurring that is breaking apart neighbors, brothers and sisters, is very problematic to me. And I think that as a religious community, that is something that we should be seeking to eliminate, or at least try to minimize, to bring forth a better Chicago.
Thank you, Jamie. Wow, Dennis and Alderman Robinson, you got to follow that up. So we'll go to Dennis first.
Well, I would say probably the largest role is building and bringing together community, and that is increasingly difficult in the environment of 40% nuns, and don't know exactly what's going to move the needle on that. We know that the pandemic took a big hit, really whacked traditional church congregations pretty badly, and it'll take a while for them to recover. But so I think that building and cohering community is probably the central issue for the religious communities or the religious groups. But there are social service aspects and support that they can give, whether it is the feeding that Grace Place does on Saturday mornings, or the collection of warm clothing that St. Chrysostom's and another Northside Episcopal church are doing now, or Second Pres has been doing with, I believe it's called Deborah's Closet for a while now, is kind of a secondary. And I'm also very impressed by the selfless work done by the night ministry and the outreach that they have at Pritzker Park, as well as other places where the unhoused gather around the central area.
Thank you, Dennis. Alderman Robinson, it's on to you.
I would have to agree with Jamie as well as Dennis. In the South Loop, we're blessed. I'll reiterate the work that Grace Church does. And to be honest with you, I really want to clone Grace Church and spread them around the Fourth Ward, particularly in areas that are challenged that I have within my ward. One of the things that also came to mind is, to whom much is given, much is required. And so in the South Loop, we do have folks that have done well. And so, and our churches, in a sense, also have done well, because these are the institutions that we support. And so one thought is that we should be working inside of the South Loop, but we should also expand ourselves, right? We should be working in Bronzeville. We should be working in Kenwood, Oakland, and Inglewood, and other areas that are in need. I'm very fortunate to have Kenwood High School, King High School, and Jones College Prep, all three great high schools. But ladies and gentlemen, I have about 4 or 5 schools that are struggling.
Oh no, we lost the Alderman. Well, I know he'll be joining us momentarily. Well, while we wait for Alderman Robinson to come back in, I guess I can start on the last fun question. Then he can join in and finish his answer, and then answer the last fun question. And this may be kind of tough, but try it as you may, Dennis and Jamie. Let us know, what is your favorite thing to do in Chicago? Maybe you can give us two, but So, Dennis.
Well, I've always enjoyed bicycling around and exploring new neighborhoods and the richness that the architecture and the built environment that we enjoy in Chicago. So I guess that is probably top of mind, at least in most warmer months. But another thing that I've always loved about living in the South Loop is being able to walk to the big events in Grant Park, whether it's the concerts, the movies in the park, the summer dance, things like that, and just be able to watch people and especially the small kids having fun and enjoying life in the city.
Thank you. Jamie, how about you?
So, I mean, Chicago is a world-class city, so there's just so much to do. I love obviously going to White Sox games, not a season ticket holder, but I did go to 32 games in 2022. I mean, tickets were only $8 so it wasn't terribly hard. But I'm also a foodie. And so I love exploring all of the restaurants, especially cuisine from around the world that Chicago has to offer. There's a restaurant from every single country in the world in the city of Chicago. So it's just fun to be able to be like, let's go get Nepalese food today, or let's go get, just some obscure, like Armenian food. Third, I love hosting my friends. All my friends from the East Coast want to get out of the swamp and come to Chicago in the summer. And when they come, we are guaranteed to do two things. One is find a boat to get on somewhere and go on the architectural tour. Those two things just never, ever get old to me. And I would do them every week if I had to. So
that's great. Yeah, it's interesting. You say there is something for everybody here. And I've shared this story. I think I shared this with Pastor Sharai when she was in her discernment process with us. But back in the .com days, I worked for a startup company out of San Francisco, and we had a meeting out in San Fran, and people were there from New York, from LA, all over. And I was telling people how I'm in Chicago. I've been there my whole life. My whole family lives in the suburbs or close by. And this one guy says, Tim, thing is, us people in LA, we all wish we were in New York, and all the people in New York wish they were in LA, and you people in Chicago are happy where you are. And I said, yeah, I guess that kind of makes some sense. But I hope that Pastor Sharai was taking lots of notes, because there's a lot of good nuggets thrown out to a new full-time resident to Chicago. I don't see any other questions in the chat. So, Pastor Amity, I don't know if you had any closing thoughts you wanted to share. Feel free.
Thank you. Yeah, I have just so appreciated our time together this evening. Very thankful for all the Grace members who've, shown out, and also the HTLoop folks. So really excited just for this opportunity for our two communities to collaborate. And I am, I'm interested in kind of next steps, taking what we all heard this evening and seeing how both our individual congregations can engage. But I'm even more excited about how our two communities might collaborate to work on some of the issues raised. I'm not sure we can bring, the new Sox Park specifically to fruition, but some other community concerns, absolutely.
Well, thanks, Pastor Amity. And Alderman Robinson is back, so feel free to finish your comments.
Tim, I think that the technical piece skipped from your phone to my phone.
Yeah.
So please forgive me. I just wanted to round out what I was saying, and that is certainly we're very blessed in the South Loop, but there are other communities that are near to us that are not so blessed. And so I would ask that you reach out to my office. One way that you can help is that our seniors are struggling. If you saw my recent newsletter, many of our seniors are needing food items and clothing items, hats and scarves. And so if you want to assist a senior, please reach out to our office at the Ward 04 at cityofchicago.org. We need your help. And we want to make sure that if there's no one in the fourth ward that is in need, because we have so many resources in our ward. So I appreciate all of you. I appreciate your support. And I really appreciate this opportunity tonight. I thoroughly enjoyed myself, and I look forward to seeing you all soon in person.
Thank you, Alderman. And we're going to give you one chance here. The question that you missed was, what is your most favorite thing to do or about Chicago?
Wow.
I'm trying to get one answer, but you probably have a bunch.
My most favorite thing to do is a drive down Lakeshore Drive in the summertime. It's nowhere else I would love to be. It is so relaxing. Just driving down Lakeshore Drive, going up to Evanston and coming back south all the way to South Shore is my #1 thing to do in the summertime. So if you see me, give me a thumbs up. Keep your eyes on the road now, but give me a honk and a thumbs up.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Alderman Robinson. And I know that Jamie just messaged that she needed to put her son to bed. And I appreciate, Dennis, you being on as well. It was great to have participation from you all. And as I mentioned before most of you joined, I think everybody in my family personally met Alderman Robinson while he was campaigning, because he was knocking on a lot of doors. And now, Alderman, I think a lot of people feel like they may have met you for the first time, and I'm glad that they had this opportunity. But thank you for your support, your Alderman Robinson, and Dennis for your work with the neighborhood association, and obviously Jamie working with the police force. So thank you all for your time. This has been recorded, and if you're interested or you know somebody who would like to hear this, just let one of us know and we'll be happy to send it along. Have a great night.